Ulaika alladhina kafaru bi ayati rabbihim wa liqa'ihi fahabitat a'maluhum fala nuqimu lahum yawma al-qiyamati waznan. Suratul-Kahfi, Surah number 18, ayat number 105. Ulaika, those. Alladhina, we can say those who or the ones who. But if we translate those are those who, it sounds a bit odd. So the other way to translate alladhina is the ones who. And now it makes much more better sense in terms of the English language, the flow is concerned. Those are the ones who. And between the two isms, there is no connection of a phrasal relationship. The word is comes in between. And in this case, the word are, which is plural. So those are the ones who kafaru, disbelieved. Bi ayati rabbihim. Bi in ayati is the plural of ayat. So in the verses, it becomes proper because of the connected idafa, and the last thing is basically proper. So verses of Lord of theirs. So the pronoun is proper. So that's why the verses of Rabbihim. It's again idafa, but we normally say their Lord instead of Lord of theirs. So in the verses of their Lord, I think that should be fine. The next part is actually very tricky, and needless to say, the translators have stumbled upon while translating this verse, and they have translated erroneously. Waliqa'ihi, and in his meeting. Now, once you see the translation, it seems so obvious, but this translation took me days to come up with this exact wording. And you think, what is the challenge in translating and in his meeting? It seems so obvious once you read the translation, isn't it? No, not exactly. And all sorts of translations you get when the translators have translated this part, waliqa'ihi. For example, they're meeting with him. It doesn't say that they're meeting with him. When we say they're meeting with him, it's wrong on multiple levels. First, the construct does not suggest so. They're meeting with him. Second, the meaning also is in conflict with what is the intended meaning. They're meeting with him. So what is the primary word? Meeting. And they're meeting, subject is there, and the doer or the subject has precedence over whatever follows. They're meeting with him prioritizes them, the wrongdoers, the disbelievers. But in his meeting, this construct, liqa'ihi, and why is liqa'i in jar form? Because the effect of be is continuing over here. Just as be made ayati, ayat into ayati instead of ayatu or ayata, the same effect of be is continuing over here. It's not liqa'u or liqa'a, it's liqa'i. And the last part obviously is the attached pronoun. So be liqa'i in his meeting. When you say his meeting, so he possesses the meeting. So the focus shifts on him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You get how the translation, the wrong translation, as you can see in all the translations, not only is in conflict with the construct, but also massively reduces the intended meaning to an extent that it reduces, it not just reduces, it reverses the meaning and the impact. I hope that was clear. It's a bit tricky. If you need to, you listen to this part again. We continue for habitat. It's a verb and it's of masculine form. It's in the feminine form. Let's see why. A'maluhum. You can see a'malu is in the rafa status. It's a'malu, not a'mala or a'mali. So that means it's the subject. And amal, the plural, amila is the form, I guess. So the plural is a'mal, and that's a broken plural. And broken plural are referenced by feminine verbs. So that's why it's feminine. That's why the verb is feminine. Habitat, habita, the general word, which means to make something to nothing, to render not. It's a sort of old English, biblical English, archaic English, and I prefer this style. And a'malu, and their deeds, hum, attached pronoun, a'maluhum, So their deeds were rendered not, were reduced to nothing. You can say that as well. That's not our primary focus of attention. How you translate this part, habitat, rendered not, were made to nothing, failed, were reduced to nothing. All these are valid translations. Fala, and thus, or thus is also a correct translation. And thus, nuqimu and al-qiyamati. So these two words are connected, comma. But here it's a bit tricky. It's one of those occasions where if you try to preserve the root word analysis, then the English sounds a bit odd. We'll try to do that as well, not an issue. Nuqimu is in the present future form. We will not assign, la is there, so we will not assign, we will assign, we will not assign. Nu is there, so it's we. We will not assign. Lahum, to them, yawma al-qiyamati, on the day of resurrection. It's idafa construct. And why is yawma in the nasab form? Because of it's an object or the detail of the verb nuqimu. On the day of resurrection, waznan, any weights whatsoever. And thus will not assign to them on the day of resurrection any weight whatsoever. Where is the word whatsoever coming from? The non-maintenance of the standard word order. So nuqimu, yawma is expected, waznan is expected before. Lahum is also okay, but then the lahum is actually in the jar status. Jar majrur, actually, technically speaking. But okay, we understand this, and if we add an emphasis over here, because that sort of emphasis is implied, is no harm done. We read this translation and now it seems okay, except for the last part. As I said, I prefer when the same root word comes, words derived from the same root word comes, I prefer to maintain that meaning from the root word. But if we try to do that in sentences, you see for yourself how it sounds. It sounds okay, not so okay. Let's see. And thus we will not assign to them, will not make it stand for them on the day of standing any weight whatsoever. So you see, so the meaning is still understandable, but in the English language it sounds really, really odd. And thus we will not make it stand for them. So the amal, right, the deeds are rendered not, and thus we will not make it stand for them on the day of standing. Al-Qiyamah, Qiyamah means standing, the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah means the day of standing or the day of resurrection. We will not make it stand for them on the day of standing any weight whatsoever. So we will not make it stand, means what? We will not assign to them. And al-Qiyamah, the day of standing is the literal one, but we are used to hearing the word the day of resurrection. So that's why I have maintained this translation, but I have explained to you as well. So that is what this verse is all about. We are continuing actually from the question asked in verse number 103, I guess, and then verse number 104 gave some details in response to the answer to the question, and verse number 5 continues with the same subject. So do you want to know who are lost? And so those who something, and this verse continues. So we'll read it one more time, and that's would be it for this session. أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه. So that we is connected. Again, وأولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا. Those are the ones who disbelieved in the verses of the Lord and in his meeting, so their deeds were rendered not, and thus we will not assign to them on the day of resurrection any weight whatsoever.